along so far this morning. You might have seen us on the earlier webcast last night, this morning. It's hard to tell what time of day it is at this point. But you saw Dragon complete a series of burns. There were a number of departure burns away from the International Space Station that Dragon completed, which allowed the spacecraft to move further and further away from the station in a series of choreographed maneuvers. Everything went really well, and like we said, now we're just awaiting for that trunk separation. And after that, we'll have a pretty exciting deorbit burn and a splashdown. So we're looking forward to all that.
Yep. Yeah, at this point, the Dragon spacecraft is well below the International Space Station and quite a few kilometers ahead of it at this point. And that's just to make sure once that trunk's separated, it's not on the same orbital plane, basically, as the International Space Station is. So that'll be the next major milestone coming up. And then that deorbit burn, which we'll go through all of those times in just a little bit. But it's going to be about a 15-minute firing of those thrusters on Dragon. And that's just basically going to take it out of orbit. So it's going to fire these thrusters until that trajectory is basically pointing it right back down in the ocean, in the Atlantic, where we're landing a spacecraft built for humans for the first time in 50 years. So this is going to be a really exciting morning. And like I said, we'll be bringing you some pretty great views. The sun is up already over on the East Coast, so we'll have a nice daytime splashdown.
As someone who has seen this specific vehicle get built over the last couple of years, it's pretty incredible to, like I mentioned earlier in today's webcast, to actually see the astronauts on board the International Space Station floating in and out of the capsule as they were opening the hatch, and that was very exciting. And then upon the departure burns earlier, to see the imagery from the station as Dragon was leaving, it was just incredible. We had some amazing shots, and we've seen the artistic renderings for a couple of years now, what it would look like when Dragon was on station, and to finally see it was just a wonderful moment in terms of those of us that have had so many hours put into this spacecraft.
It almost didn't look real when,
yeah.
you see it, when you actually saw it flying out there. But I mean, since it departed, that happened early in the cruise day on board the space station, so they've since moved on to a bunch of other tasks. They actually woke up about an hour before Crew Dragon undocked, as they're operating on Greenwich Mean Time, so it was early in the morning for them. But they did offer some great words as Dragon undocked and flew away once it was outside of the approach ellipsoid, so about a kilometer or so away from the International Space Station. And as Kate said, it executed all of its departure burns. It executed 4 departure burns following that initial separation, basically taking it out in front and then up around and then finally out beneath the International Space Station, where it's now on its orbit awaiting this trunk separation and eventually the deorbit burn.
Yeah. So in terms of SpaceX history, this demonstration mission is incredibly important, as it's, like I said, the demonstration of our crew program. Interestingly enough, the Dragon spacecraft that's hanging behind me here in Hawthorne, California, SpaceX headquarters, is similarly the same demonstration mission of our cargo program that we've been operating for NASA for the last couple of years in terms of the cargo resupply missions to the International Space Station. So who knows if the Demo 1 capsule will also be hanging behind us here in Hawthorne. I don't think we have the structural support for that, but in terms of what you see behind me, it's similar in terms of historical referencing for the importance of today's mission.
And that capsule actually already has another mission on the books for it. SpaceX is planning to use it in their ascent abort test coming a little bit later this year. That'll be between Demo 1, which we're about to wrap up today, and Demo 2, which will be the first flight that we actually have our astronauts on board that spacecraft. Bob Behnken and Doug Hurley, the 2 NASA astronauts, will be the first one to take Dragon into space. And the ascent abort, that will be a pretty cool test to see.
I wouldn't want to be involved with it because that's a lot of G-forces, but it'll be really important for us to be able to demonstrate the ability for the capsule to leave the vehicle in an urgent need to do so. So we're all looking forward to that test flight, as it's also something we've been working towards for the last couple of years. And yeah, that should be coming up in a couple of months here.
Yeah, and that'll be the second abort you guys have done, because you did a pad abort test already with the Dragon spacecraft. So basically just really putting the vehicle through all of the paces, all of these different abort tests, missions like this one right now, all ultimately with that goal of sending humans to the International Space Station on a Crew Dragon.
Yeah. Something else really interesting about today's mission, and in fact the commercial crew program going forward in terms of SpaceX's approach to landing the capsules, we are landing them in the Atlantic, like we mentioned earlier, whereas the cargo resupply mission, Dragon capsules have all landed in the Pacific. So today is really exciting. We're really pumped to bring you footage of our recovery team as we pull Dragon out of the Atlantic Ocean. It's a lot of firsts today. It's been a lot of firsts all week, and to say the adrenaline has been pumping around here is an understatement.
Yeah, we even had a crowd earlier this morning behind us gathered down at the control, and there's
even more
crowd.
now.
Yeah, now it's 4:30 in the morning here on the West Coast, but the crowd is already starting to gather here at SpaceX headquarters. But interesting note, normally those cargo Dragons landing over in the Pacific, and while this vehicle ultimately designed for crew, it's also carrying some cargo. It carried about 400 pounds of cargo up to the International Space Station, and it's been packed with a little over 300 pounds for the return trip home. And that's broken out across a couple of different areas. One of the more interesting ones, and one of the ones NASA's really keen on, is it's bringing back what we call utilization, so some science samples. It actually has 2 bags. They're basically like coolers on board that are packed with these cold bricks that we're able to put science samples in. So the ones that are coming back home today using some of the human research projects on board the International Space Station is, we like to say, the astronauts are experiments themselves. We're always poking and prodding while they're up there just to see how the human body changes and reacts in microgravity. And a lot of the samples from a couple of those projects are coming home on Dragon today. Also bringing home a couple of radiation monitors, and one thing that our program manager, Kirk Shireman for the Space Station program, noted, it's also going to have a fan pump separator on it. And that's actually a piece, it's a piece of the spacesuits, the EMUs, the extravehicular mobility units. I'm from NASA, and we still use way too many acronyms. And it's a piece that actually failed on orbit some time back, and they're bringing it home to take a look at it. It was since replaced with a spare unit. And we do have some spacewalks coming up in March. So very busy time in space right now, but right now kind of all focused on watching this Dragon come home.
So the next milestone that we have coming up in about 7 minutes is the trunk separation. We will take a break for a few minutes while we await that, so stay tuned and we'll see you in a couple.
Oh, so right now we're waiting to hear for that trunk separation again. We are expecting to get that call just on the internal nets any moment now. That'll be the next major milestone, and then it'll be on to Deorbit Burn.
Exactly. So we should have that call out any minute now. As we await for trunk separation, this is the last thing that Dragon has to do before it is able to re-enter the Earth's atmosphere and splash down in the Atlantic Ocean.
That's right, yeah. The trunk not coming home, but the rest of the Dragon capsule, the more important part, is going to be coming home. The other stuff that Dragon's going to do before it does that final re-entry is close that nose cone, and we'll get through a little bit of that soon, but basically that nose cone is going to protect that top part of the Dragon spacecraft, the docking adapter, and also the guidance and navigation and control sensors. So that's one of the last major milestones. That's another kind of departure from the cargo Dragon, which that nose cone gets jettisoned during the launch phase. But with Crew Dragon keeping the nose cone all the way through, it helps in the actual reusability of the Crew Dragon for future missions.
Now that trunk section is unpressurized, and we are able to use it to transport cargo on the way up to the International Space Station, but everything that comes back from station is put into the pressurized section. So we are able to jettison that trunk as it's no longer needed, and we're able to shed that extra weight.
And I think we just heard trunk separation.
All right, so hopefully we'll be able to bring you visual here shortly. Actually, no, we're too far away from station at the moment, so yeah.
Yep. So next up is going to be the spacecraft using some forward thrusters to perform the deorbit burn. This is going to be a really major step because once that deorbit burn happens, you're coming home. You're leaving orbit and you're coming back to Earth.
Can't wait.
And that's going to put Dragon on a trajectory for that return. The burn will last about 15 minutes once it starts. So we're going to, again, continue to stand by. This is kind of the calm before the storm, if you will, where we're just waiting for things to really get into motion. Dragon's going to pretty soon do that deorbit burn. And then following that, it only takes about 45 minutes or so until it's in the water, down in the Atlantic, and ready to get picked up by the teams on the boats out there. So once again, we're going to continue to stand by. We're going to bring you these updates as they come in. But one more milestone down, just a few more to go, and then Dragon's home. And so again, right now we're just standing by for this deorbit burn to start. We are expecting it to start in about a minute or so. And then after that, it's going to take a little over 15 minutes to complete.
Yeah, so we have already jettisoned the trunk, as you heard us talk about a couple minutes ago. That was the last thing Dragon needed to do before it is able to re-enter the Earth's atmosphere. And like we said, that'll be about a 15-minute burn, and then we will have parachute deployment and splashdown after that. So, like Dan said, kind of the calm before the storm. We're going to have a lot of activity coming up once we do pass through the re-entry burn. But at this point, we should be getting confirmation of the deorbit burn in a couple of seconds here.
That's right. And once the deorbit burn is complete, it's just about, I'm trying to do quick math in my head as I look at everything, but it's just about 40 minutes or so until Dragon's scheduled to be back down in the water. So it's a pretty quick ride from being in outer space to being right back down in the ocean. And we just
had confirmation of the deorbit burn. So like we said, this will last about 15 minutes. So deorbit burn has begun. At this point, Dragon has begun to re-enter the Earth's atmosphere. It's going to get a little toasty, but we're excited for this to happen, as it is the next step, the next milestone in its journey home.
That's right. And again, ultimate destination down in the Atlantic Ocean, and there are boats standing by. We'll go through all the recovery courses and everything on site, but there is one main recovery boat. It's the Go Searcher, and that's going to have all of the SpaceX recovery teams who are responsible for actually going out and picking the capsule up out of the water. That is a view of the Go Searcher. This is actually a camera view from one of the other boats that's in the area, the Go Navigator, that has the combined NASA team on board as well. So once we actually have crew on board, everyone's going to be on one boat, so it'll be a little bit tighter quarters. But you'll have obviously the SpaceX people to go and recover the capsule, and then the NASA people typically also bring along the flight docs and the nurses. Anybody who's ever seen a landing in a Soyuz over in Kazakhstan is familiar with that. Once the crew comes home, after about a 6-month period, it's important we get a quick medical check out with them, just take the vitals, make sure they're doing okay, and help manage as they readapt to Earth's gravity for the first time in, up to 6 months or longer. So everyone will be on one boat, but for today we do have 2 boats, so we'll get some additional views, hopefully, from those different cameras as we get to watch Dragon come down. But for now, we are in that deorbit burn, so we got a couple more minutes until that is complete, and then we're one step closer to Dragon being back.
Yeah, so while Dragon is re-entering the Earth's atmosphere, we're going to pause for a few minutes until the deorbit burn completes. So be sure to stick around, and we'll see you in a few minutes.
right now we're about halfway through that deorbit burn. So again, we expect it to last about 15 minutes and 20 seconds. The visiting vehicle officer all the way back in Houston was just reporting to the station flight director, again, that we were about halfway through. We're continuing to get a couple of views from the boats, and again, those are cameras that are going to be tracking Dragon once it's coming down under those parachutes. And we're also starting to get, it looks like this is a view from a WB-57 airplane. And so we have a number of assets out there off the Florida coast. Again, there's two ships rather, both with tracking cameras on board. And NASA also flying its WB-57 aircraft, typically used for high altitude weather research and other science missions. But it has a camera affixed on it and should hopefully give us some views of Dragon coming down under those parachutes.
So there on your screen, you see a beautiful shot of Ghost Searcher, which is our primary recovery vessel. There on the front part of the ship, you can see what would essentially be the crew's quarters during the wait. They could be out to sea, depending on how rough the waves are, for a couple of weeks to just a couple of days, depending on the splashdown point. So they're coming into the view on the right-hand side of your screen. At the top is actually the helipad. For helicopters to land if we need to take the astronauts to shore quicker than just having them ride along on the ship. And really something that I just absolutely love about this vessel is underneath that helipad are actually medical quarters. So we're able to get the astronauts checked out immediately after egressing from the capsule, and we're able to check them out there and give them a warm welcome, not on land yet, obviously, but it's just such an incredible vehicle there that we're able to sustain so much activity while we're waiting for the astronauts to splash down, and then obviously once they are on board.
It's also important to note, so right now the teams are about 200 or so, give or take, nautical miles off the coast. That won't be the case when we are bringing crew members back. That landing zone much closer in. I think it typically ranges out about 20 to 24 nautical miles or so away from the port. So that gives them the capability to then get back in within just a couple of hours instead of a little over a day that it's looking like it's going to take the teams to bring Dragon back after this mission.
There we have some views from Dragon as it is re-entering the atmosphere. It's pretty dark in space.
Yeah, we're still in the midst of that deorbit burn. We're expecting that to take about 5 more minutes, so that's pretty unique, getting views from the spacecraft while that deorbit burn is still underway. But again, this is just the final maneuver, that final firing of those Draco thrusters, just to bring Dragon out of orbit and set it up on a trajectory to ultimately splash down over there in the Atlantic, where, as you were just seeing, the recovery teams are standing by, ready and waiting to receive. And again, this deorbit burn planned to last about 15 minutes and 20 seconds. And this is just to ultimately carry Dragon out of its circular orbit. So right now it's been in a circular orbit just beneath the space station's orbit. We call it a co-elliptic orbit for the last several hours. And this deorbit burn is going to radically change that planned orbit, basically setting it up to intersect back down with the Earth, back down there in the water where the recovery teams are waiting.
Now that we have a full view of the recovery vessel on the very right side of your screen, we can see a portion of the ship that we weren't able to see before, and that's actually the portion of the ship where once the Dragon capsule is close enough, it will be lifted up out of the water by that vertical piece that you see there. It'll actually actuate out over the water and lift the Dragon capsule up out of the ocean and then bring it back onto the boat and set it down into its nest. So pretty cool. This is new technology that we've installed on this ship specifically for our Crew Dragon missions. So it's like we said before, this is a demonstration mission, and while our recovery team has been practicing for recovery operations, this is obviously the first time that they will be practicing with a vehicle that's coming from space. So we're all very excited to be bringing you live coverage as all of this unfolds over the next hour or so.
And to give you a timeline of that recovery period, it's expected to take a little under an hour or so for the teams to actually have the capsule back up on the boat, which in a situation where there's crew on board, that's about that hour to get the crew out of the water and onto the boat so they can do all of their initial medical checks and everything else that we typically do after crew members are returning from these long duration missions. The waves looking pretty calm though, looking like really good conditions out there in the Atlantic. Again, they're a little over 200 nautical miles off the coast of Florida, and they'll ultimately be bound back for Port Canaveral, where the spacecraft's going to get brought back in and handed over to the SpaceX teams there, where they're going to begin processing and then pretty much getting ready to turn it around for that ascent aboard.
Yeah. We've been monitoring the recovery weather conditions over the last several days, and now that Recovery Day has come upon us, we can see that we have beautiful skies and in my unprofessional nautical knowledge, relatively calm seas by my eyes. But it's really difficult to be able to predict what the weather is going to be like at sea very far in advance. So we're all very happy to be able to have clear imagery of the recovery team as we make progress here.
I feel like we've lucked out with Florida weather so far on this mission. All right, and we're here, and there's about 1 minute left in this deorbit burn, so just about done with that. And again, this is just that final maneuver to begin bringing Dragon out of space and down to the ocean. We're still getting a couple of views from on board the Dragon spacecraft. That's what you're looking at right now. Now we're just going to stand by and listen for how the deorbit burn went. Should be wrapping up momentarily.
So like Dan said, we are waiting confirmation of the conclusion of the deorbit burn. It's been going on for the last several minutes, and like we said before, Dragon departed space station earlier today, performed a number of departure burns, and now we are hopefully just exiting the final burn, and that's the reentry burn. And there on the left-hand side of your screen, you can see our recovery vessel waiting for the splashdown of Dragon. Once we exit the reentry burn, we will have parachute deployment. The first one of those will be the Drogue chutes, the smaller chutes that slow the vehicle down, followed by the main parachute deployment. And that will slow it down even further, allowing it to come to a slower velocity as it approaches the surface of the ocean.
And we are being told that was a nominal burn, so the deorbit burn is complete. Dragon is on its way home. And so the next thing that's going to happen is that nose cone on Dragon is going to get closed. We heard that process is now in work. And then it's time for Dragon to really get through the Earth's atmosphere and ultimately splash down. So that's where the vehicle is going to heat up tremendously, because again, you have to keep in mind Dragon traveling at thousands of miles per hour right now, and when it hits the thicker part of the Earth's atmosphere, it's going to heat up tremendously from the friction. And this is actually video of the nose cone starting to close on the Dragon spacecraft. And again, that nose cone just closes to protect that top portion of the vehicle from all of the re-entry events, not only the re-entry through the Earth's atmosphere, but also once it's down in the water. and that protects the guidance and navigation and control sensors on top of Dragon, and also that docking ring that it uses to attach to the space station.
So again, what you're seeing right now is the nose cone closing on the Dragon spacecraft as we await for it to re-enter the Earth's atmosphere.
All right, so that nose cone looks like it's just about closed. We'll wait for final confirmation that everything looks good with it. But then pretty soon we're going to be looking towards the actual entry interface. So that's, again, where Dragon starts hitting enough atmosphere that it's going to start heating up, because right now it's still high enough, even following that deorbit burn, that it's still not feeling those effects. But the atmosphere is going to get thicker as it starts to descend, and that's going to heat the vehicle up. That's why you always have this heat shield on the bottom of these spacecrafts, and that's why a lot of them are in this conical shape. As a lot of engineers I've talked to, they like to say physics haven't changed since the 1960s. When we made the spacecraft back then, it was for that it was that shape for a reason, and so that's why it's so common to see this capsule design. Just because of how you re-enter the Earth's atmosphere, it makes a lot of sense.
So we just heard confirmation that the nose cone hooks have begun the process of securing the nose cone into place prior to that re-entry burn.
Right, and so there's actually an anticipated time where you lose signal with the spacecraft, and that's just because as you're re-entering the Earth's atmosphere and you go through that intense heat, plasma actually builds up on the outside of the spacecraft, and you can't send or receive signals from there. So it's very common when there's people on board, you'll lose the voice communication between them and the ground, and you'll lose all the telemetry or the data streams that you have coming from the spacecraft to rooms like the Mission Control Center just behind us here in Hawthorne. So that'll be coming up. We're expecting that to happen at about 5:33 a.m. Pacific. So coming up in just about 20 minutes from now.
Exactly, and so after we are able to get through that phase of the mission, like we said before, following that will be the deployment of the parachutes and then splashdown.
Right.
So just a quick recap in case if you have just joined us recently. We have departed from the International Space Station. Dragon completed a series of 4 departure burns in a slowly choreographed maneuver, and now we have already jettisoned the trunk of the Dragon spacecraft. We have completed the deorbit burn, and now we're just starting to come back down through the Earth's atmosphere and the final leg on Dragon's way home.
That's right, so that nose cone's closed, and we're just going to be standing by to wait until we go through that entry interface. Again, that'll be about 20 minutes from now, and then once it's down through there, it's time for the parachutes. And we talked about the parachutes a little while ago, and we should hopefully get to see those parachutes maybe from the plane, but once it's down beneath the cloud deck, so we should be able to see them from the boats that'll be standing by out there at the recovery zone. And it comes in 2 different stages. Can you walk us through the parachutes real quick?
Yeah. So with the parachutes, we will have the Drogue parachutes. Those are the smaller chutes that will come out that will slow the vehicle down a little bit, and then we will have the main parachutes. Those are clearly visible by the orange and white coloring on them. Very iconic if you've watched our previous Dragon splashdowns for the cargo resupply missions. So we will have that, and then that's what will slow the vehicle down enough to have a safe splashdown in the water. So at this point, another fun fact about Dragon, in the return to Earth, the seats inside the capsule at this point have actuated or turned into the re-entry position. So depending on what phase of the mission we are in, the seats will actually actuate or adjust the angle to make sure that the G-forces that the astronauts will be experiencing are in the right places. So with that being said, we will take a quick break as we active operations here at SpaceX. So with that being said, we will take a quick break. Be sure to stay tuned with us as we go through this period of anticipated blackout with the Dragon capsule. We'll be back in just a few as we come back in anticipation of that parachute deployment. Stick around.
And if you're just now joining us, we have had a successful deorbit burn, so that was the last major milestone. We've also confirmed that the nose cone is closed, the hook's all engaged, and so now we're just waiting for Dragon to begin making its way through the Earth's atmosphere. That deorbit burn lasted a little over 15 minutes and was reported that it was done successfully, no issues, and Dragon is now on its way home. You're continuing to get some pretty great views from the boats out there in the splashdown zone. We're also going to be on the lookout for some video possibly from an aircraft that we have in the area. One of NASA's WB-57 research planes is going to be trying to get some views of Dragon and the chute deploy and actually coming down under the parachutes. There are some clouds in the area, so the boats might not see it right away, but once it's underneath those cloud decks, they'll have some pretty great views of it coming down.
So there on your screen, again, you can see our primary recovery vessel. That is, well, there it went. But that is our recovery ship that is fully equipped with medical quarters for checkouts. Once we do have crew on board Dragon for our upcoming missions, they will be able to come out of the capsule and get a full medical checkout immediately afterward. There's also a helipad there where a helicopter can land in the event that we might need to get them back to port sooner than what the boat may be able to go. And there on your screen you can actually see, I mentioned earlier, the lift that will bring Dragon out of the water has actuated it into its recovery position. So that you can see on the right-hand side of your screen at the end of the boat, and that is what will actually take Dragon out of the water, lift it up, and then place it into its nest, which it's the official term for it on the ship, and then that would be considered the end. At least whenever we get to that point, that will be the end of our webcast today. But at this point, we're still waiting for the parachutes to deploy and then for the entire recovery operation, which, like I mentioned before, the recovery team has practiced this, but obviously not with a vessel that has come down from the International Space Station yet. So a lot of firsts that we'll be seeing today, and we're really excited to be able to share that with you.
Yeah, and if you missed the very beginning, the fun historical tidbit we had for today was it's been almost 50 years to the day since we've landed a spacecraft designed for humans in the Atlantic Ocean. That last one was Apollo 9, and that was back on March 13th, 1969. It was actually supposed to land in the Pacific, but ended up shooting for the Atlantic, and that was the last time they landed one in that area. So it's going to be exciting to see this water recovery. All of our crew members for the last couple of years, well, basically since we stopped flying the space shuttle, have come down for land landings over in Kazakhstan on the Russian Soyuz spacecraft. But in the not too distant future, we'll have crew members Doug Hurley and Bob Benkin, still waking up. They'll be on the Dragon for the Demo 2 mission a little bit later this year. So everything looking really good so far. We're going to continue to stand by and wait for that entry interface. We are just about 20 minutes away from when we're expecting to actually see Dragon under those parachutes. So not much longer, good things to come.
There's a lot of anticipation. There's a crowd growing behind me here at SpaceX headquarters. Our mission control center is just down there, and you can probably hear the voices in the room around us, and the crowd is definitely starting to grow in anticipation of Dragon's reappearance. So with that being said, we will take a quick break as we await for Dragon to re-enter and for those parachute deployments. Stick around, we'll be back in just a few.
so we're getting a bit of a treat here. You're getting a live view inside the Dragon Capsule as, again, it's getting closer and closer to that entry interface, coming through the Earth's atmosphere and then splashing down in the Atlantic Ocean. But first, we have a very special guest, somebody who's going to be on board a Dragon in the not-too-distant future, NASA astronaut Bob Behnken. Bob, thanks for being here. Thanks for taking a couple of minutes. I know you're following along with the teams. There's a lot of excitement. How are you feeling about the mission so far?
Well, I think I said this before when we were out here for the ascent phase and docking. Just super excited. You know, of course, this one is the precursor for our mission that's upcoming here, and so when this one's done successfully, we'll be one step closer to our flight.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
So what is in store for you between now and that flight? What kind of preparations do you have left to do?
That's a great question. We have a significant amount of training that we need to go through, so we'll walk through all the various phases of flight. So we'll do pre-launch, we'll get suited, we'll do that here in Hawthorne in the Buck. We'll do a walkthrough at the Kennedy Space Center, actually on the launch pad. Learn a little bit more about the emergency escape system if we should need that prior to launching into space. And so we'll walk through all those different scenarios. Then we'll head back out here again for a couple of other events associated with docking and, of course, with the reentry.
Awesome.
And so we're getting views inside the Dragon spacecraft, and I mean, a camera's okay, but it can't do the real thing justice. What's it like to be like in a spacecraft when you're coming back through and everything's heating up?
Yeah, there's a couple of pieces of coming back through the atmosphere. The first one is really emotional for those of us who've seen a lot of spacecraft come back. It's just it's very special to kind of go through that experience, and it's a physical thing as well, as you actually see the light from the atmosphere as it heats up the external portions of the spacecraft. You see some orange lights flickering, the plasma kind of go past the windows. The windows will be down in near our feet on this vehicle. That'll be our closest view out the window per se, but it's definitely something that we'll be able to see and know the outside of the vehicle is going through something pretty severe, and we'll be hoping it takes care of us as it takes us through entry.
That's incredible. I can't even imagine what that experience might be like.
It's remarkable. Again, there's the physical piece of it. You can, sensations that come in with the light, but there's also the emotion of knowing that you're taking all that energy that you put into the vehicle to get it into orbit. It's all got to come back out so that you can get back to the ground safely.
So it's been a while since you've been to space. Is there anything you're really looking forward to when you get to the space station? Anything like what's your bucket list once you get back up there?
For me, when I get back to the International Space Station, I really am looking forward to seeing it completely complete. I was pretty close with my flight. We put the cupola on the underside of the space station. One of the things close to the construction complete on the International Space Station. So I'm looking forward to getting back in there and actually experiencing sunrises and sunsets again. They're just remarkable from on orbit. Not quite the same as they are from the ground, and can't get that anyplace else.
Last question for you. I'm sure you've been following along on social media. You've seen the photos of our zero-G indicator. Now, he's not coming back until you bring him back for us, so you'll have a little bit of time to play with him while you're on station. Is there anything that you would like to teach little Earthy while you're up on station with him?
Yeah, that's a good question. I didn't actually realize that little Earthy was going to stay on board the space station until Lee Rosen, one of your folks here at SpaceX, come and let us know when we sat down to watch undocking, and he said, "Hey, we're going to need Earthy back. You got to bring him back." And so I think our plan is to have him teach us. He's going to welcome us aboard probably when we get there. And I think Ann and David and Oleg have trained him up well. So hopefully he can walk us through the emergency brief, and he's a full-fledged station crew member by the time that we get there.
Well, it definitely looks like he's been getting a crash course in just about everything.
Yeah, he should have it all, and he ought to be able to transfer it to us. That's part of being a crew member that arrives and takes over responsibilities on the International Space Station.
That's very cool. Well, we certainly look forward to him coming back, as well as you and Doug, in our Demo 2 mission in a couple of months. So it'll be very exciting.
Very much looking forward to it, as you might imagine.
Us as well.
Thank you.
Well, we're going to get back to the re-entry interface. Bob, we're going to let you go watch along because, again, vested interest in everything that's happening. Thanks so much for jumping upstairs real quick and talking with us.
Thank you again.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
So with that, we are awaiting the deployment, or excuse me, the final phase of the re-entry of Dragon Spacecraft as it's coming back through the Earth's atmosphere. I'm still kind of reeling from his comments about what it's like to actually come barreling through the Earth's atmosphere, something that you see depicted in movies and TV shows, of course, but to hear it live from the source is pretty cool. And that's exactly what Dragon and Ripley are doing right now. So we brought you a live view of that just a couple of minutes ago. That was pretty cool that we were able to get that shot. Like we said, plasma will be building up on the exterior of the vehicle as it's re-entering the atmosphere. So there's a blackout period that we were expecting, and that's where we're at right now. So, but we can't bring you a view of Ripley on her journey back to the Atlantic Ocean. You can see a view of our recovery ship there. Like I said before, we can now see that the lift arms have actuated out into the recovery position, and they're like that in anticipation of Dragon being pulled in to position closer to the end of the ship and being lifted up into the recovery nest.
And you got to imagine the teams out there on the ocean are ready for this to come home. And again, since they're about 200, give or take, nautical miles out to sea, they actually left yesterday, so they've been out on the water for some time. So they're ready and waiting. Again, the prime team is on that Ghost Searcher, and that's a bunch of SpaceX technicians who are going to be responsible for going out on some fast boats that will deploy from that prime ship. And they'll begin just basically getting the capsule stable and then bringing it in closer to ultimately get hoisted up on the ship. Also going off to make sure that they get those parachutes as those get jettisoned from the capsule at pretty much just at the moment of touchdown. So we're just going to be ready to watch all of that unfold pretty soon. We should be seeing those parachutes in about 10 or 11 minutes from now, right after Dragon begins that final plunge through the Earth's atmosphere. So we're getting a lot closer. Things are really going to pick up once we get those first views of Dragon over the Atlantic there.
Absolutely. So like Dan just said, we've got about 10 minutes until we see the first deployment, which are the deployments of the Drogue parachutes. So with that being said, we're going to take a quick break, and we'll be back in a few as we get closer to parachute deployment.
this is a view from that WB-57 airplane. You were looking at Dragon streaking across the sky on its re-entry through the Earth's atmosphere, aiming for a splashdown in just a little while from now.
So it's pretty exciting that we get this shot right now, as it is our first view from planet Earth of the Dragon capsule since it lifted off from Cape Canaveral just several days ago.
I will say this is a pretty rare treat to be able to see this here. And again, this video is coming from a NASA airplane that we're flying around that recovery zone there, a WB-57. It's commonly used for a lot of atmospheric studies and other science missions, but able to put a tracking camera on it to try and get this re-entry through the Earth's atmosphere today. We're hearing that they should have AOSO acquisition of signal back with the Dragon spacecraft. Right now it's about 46 kilometers in altitude.
Yeah, so just for orientation purposes, if you've seen our launches previously, you might be familiar with the angling of this as takeoff. Reminder, this is re-entry. The plane is below the Dragon spacecraft and the camera is looking upward as it's coming over the spacecraft. So it looks like from the orientation of the imagery there that Dragon is going up, when in fact it is still coming back down towards Earth.
And again, just keeping you on the timeline, so we actually acquired signal about a minute ahead of when it was expected, where we're going to be looking for those initial Drogue Chute deployments at about 41 minutes after the hour. So after Dragon gets a little bit lower down, we're going to be keeping an eye out. You're going to see the Drogue Chutes deploy initially, followed by those 4 main parachutes, much larger and able to slow the vehicle down for a much softer splashdown in the ocean.
We should be getting that Drogue Chute deployment in just about 2 minutes now.
And just heard that we're now below 30 kilometers. And if you're just now tuning in, this is Dragon. This is Dragon coming home. This is from a camera on board a chase plane there at the landing zone over the Atlantic, about 200 or so nautical miles off the coast of Florida. We're under 30 kilometers, continuing to descend. The next milestone we're going to be looking for is parachute deployment. And hearing we're now about 20 kilometers in altitude. The Dragon spacecraft continuing to descend. It's now subsonic, so already starting to slow down thanks to the aerobraking, basically slamming into that Earth's atmosphere, causes a lot of friction and allows the vehicle to eventually reach its terminal velocity, basically. And then those parachutes are going to kick in.
So there you have visual confirmation of the deployment of our Drogue parachutes. This is the first of 2 parachute deployments.
So those Drogue chutes do the initial slowing, and then they're ultimately going to pull out the 4 main parachutes responsible for really slowing the spacecraft down prior to that splashdown.
You can hear cheering here at SpaceX headquarters as the employees that have gathered around our Mission Control Center are sharing the same view as you. What a gorgeous shot of Dragon coming back down. seconds, we will see those main parachutes exactly like that begin to expand as they capture more air, further decelerating the Dragon vehicle down to the Atlantic Ocean. Really can't ask for a more picture-perfect shot than that.
And yes, all 4 chutes now deployed. It's going to continue to descend. It's going to continue to slow down and then ultimately splash down in the Atlantic there. We're now under a kilometer in altitude. Just about 750 meters to go.
In case if you're just joining us, you can see on your screen there, Dragon has just re-entered the Earth's atmosphere after departing from the International Space Station. We have a gorgeous shot of 4 healthy parachutes deployed and slowing the vehicle down as it is approaching the surface of the Atlantic Ocean off the coast of Florida.
And it's continuing to descend under those chutes. We just passed 500 meters. Everything continuing to look good via reports to all the flight control teams. Now we're at about 400 meters. And just passing 300 meters, continuing to descend. We might be right on time. We were planning on splashing down at about 5:45 a.m. Pacific, and we're getting real close to that bingo time. Just past 200 meters.
And we have confirmation that Dragon is now under 100 meters, is 100 meters above the surface of the ocean.
So next up, standing by for splashdown.
Confirmation of splashdown. Dragon has returned to planet Earth. It is now back home, and you can see on your screen our 2 fast boats racing out to the capsule, now in recovery.
That splashdown came right on time, 5:45 a.m. Pacific, 8:45 a.m. over on the East Coast. The teams that have been ready and waiting, they were staged just a few nautical miles away. They're going to start moving in now. You can see those 2 fast approach boats already speeding their way towards the capsule.
While there's still a little bit more work to be done at this point, like we said, the recovery team has to safe the vehicle and then lift it onto the recovery vessel. However, obviously by the excited cheers here at Mission Control, the splashdown is an enormous event for us in terms of the safe re-entry, the safe return to Earth from the International Space Station.
That's right, and you'll notice 2 boats on their way. One boat actually responsible for beginning to safe the vehicle and get it ready to go up onto the boat. The other one's going to go off and collect those parachutes as those 4 main chutes actually get jettisoned away from the spacecraft as soon as the vehicle detects that it's splashed down in the water. But if you missed it, I'm really sorry because that was really cool to see. But Dragon did splash down at 5:45 a.m. Pacific time, 8:45 a.m. over there on the East Coast, where they're now moving in on a Dragon spacecraft in the water, ready to recover it.
Exactly. So like we said, the recovery team has been ready and waiting for a Dragon splashdown. It's been quite the morning. evening. Dan and I have been here since yesterday night, bringing you coverage from Dragon departure from the International Space Station now all the way down to Splashdown. So it's a great next milestone, and we are excited to bring you coverage of the recovery operations as well. But we have a few minutes before that happens, so we're going to take a break momentarily, and we will continue bringing coverage as the recovery operations progress.
we're going to take a quick break from the operations because right now we have Benji Reed. He's the director of the Commercial Crew Mission Management here at SpaceX. Benji, first off, congratulations. Successful splashdown, successful end of Demo 1. What's it been like to watch through this mission? What are your thoughts? What are you looking forward to? Have you had a chance to catch your breath?
No, but I'm super excited. Thank you for having me up here. To be honest, I'm kind of shaking, and I'm super, excited. It was an incredible journey to get to this moment. The teams have just done an amazing job, both the SpaceX and the NASA teams jointly. It's fundamentally, this is like a great day for the nation, for SpaceX, for NASA, for all of us, really for the world. I think it was Ann who said this is the first time in 40 years that we've have a spacecraft designed for humans to fly. And not only did she fly and go to the space station, do everything she was supposed to do, but we brought her home safe and sound, landing here in the Atlantic. Just amazing. I can't believe how well the whole mission has gone. Pretty much, I think on every point, everything's been nailed all the way along. Particularly this last piece, we're all very excited to see as we go through reentry and parachute, drogue deployed, and main deploy. Splashdown, everything happened just perfectly, right on time, the way that we expected it to.
Almost down to the second.
Almost down to the second, right? Yeah. It was amazing.
Yeah.
And so, as a team, SpaceX, we're here, we're just super honored to have the opportunity to have done this mission, to have worked with NASA, to work through this. And Demo 1 is fundamentally this first major milestone in our process towards certification. I always like to remind everybody that this is a whole system, right? There's Crew Dragon, but there's the Falcon that's going to be certified to fly humans. There's also all the ground systems, the operations, our entire factory and production system. Everything that we do is being certified to be able to fly astronauts safely. And this is a huge step towards that. As we kind of look back over what happened over the last few days, which seems incredible to me, and really it's the culmination of years of work to get us just to this day. We had launch, Crew Dragon deployed, beautiful free flight. One of the things that's hard to test when you're on the ground is how fluids work in microgravity. So things like the prop system and all of the propulsion. And what's amazing is that worked perfectly, just like we expected. We got to station, we docked, and it's the first time I think in history that a commercial vehicle and also an American vehicle has docked autonomously to the International Space Station. So that's just super cool. Loaded with all kinds of sensors, all kinds of tests that we did. We met Ripley. Yeah. We got to see, she's loaded with sensors so we can understand exactly all the forces that'll happen on the crew as they come, as they're launched and then sent to station and come home. We got to meet the Little Earth guy. I heard he's going to stay on station. Yep. and so that'll be for Bob and Doug to retrieve. So that's going to be exciting. Undocking, of course. Some more free flight, and then we came home. Jettisoned the trunk, closed the nose cone, and then again, like I said, just beautiful parachute deployment. Everything the way we expected. All of these gazillions of tests that we've been doing on parachutes. All of the analysis and work that we've done on understanding the aerodynamics of reentry and coming home, everything's just wonderful. The important thing now is we take all of this data that we've learned.
We love data.
And we love data, right? I mean, fundamentally, we're engineers and engineering-driven behavior, right? It's what we got to do. So we take all that great data, and we're going to apply that to the next steps. So what's coming up next? I think, because believe it or not, as excited and still shaking as I am about this return, there's a lot more to do, right? Because our ultimate goal is to be able to continue to staff space station, right, and provide astronauts rides up to space, give them a safe place to be, a safe place to come home in, and do crew rotations every 6 months. So how do we get there? So we finished Demo 1, huge milestone. Next up, we take that data, we apply it, we learn from it, and we're going to go to our in-flight abort test, similar to that pad abort test that we did a few years ago. Except this time we put the Dragon, and actually the same Dragon that we flew on Demo 1. We're going to take that and put it on top of a Falcon 9, launch it, get it going super fast, get it to test conditions, and then escape it off of the rocket, and again do the same thing, bring it home safely on its parachutes, land it in the ocean. And then from there, after we get that done, we go to Demo 2. And that's kind of like, wow, that's the big prize, right? Because that's going to be sending Bob and Doug our astronauts and our partners and our friends, sending them up on Dragon, taking them to the station safely, bringing them home safely. And then with that done, we'll go through final full certification and start those 6-month rotation missions, which we're just also excited about. It's important to take a step back and think about all of what it took to get here, all the work from all the joint teams, NASA and SpaceX, all the support that we've had from friends and family. And really, I think the most important thing is that on behalf of all of the 6,000 people here at SpaceX, we really want to thank NASA, we want to thank the space station, the international partners, and thank the American public for their support and partnership as we go through this. We're really proud to be part of this endeavor.
Thank you for being here with us. It is early Friday morning here in Hawthorne, so for those of us that work here at SpaceX, we still got a full workday going, and obviously we've already been working on Demo 2 for a while, even though today was the Demo 1 day, so I'm sure that you, like me, will continue our work on Demo 2 for the rest of the day.
I'm going into meetings to start talking about the next step that we've already been working on Demo 2. So.
Exactly. Well, thank you so much for being here with us. Congratulations to your team as well on the success of the last week. Really, it's been awesome for us to be able to share the hard work of all SpaceX employees with the public. So with that being said, thanks for being here. We're going to take a quick break as we bring you more coverage of the recovery operations, which you can see is ongoing on your screen there on the left. So stick around. We'll be back in just a couple.
waiting to get some video back from those recovery teams out there in the Atlantic. For now, though, we do have another guest for today's broadcast, NASA Administrator Jim Bridenstine, who's standing by over at NASA headquarters in Washington, D.C. So I'll send it over to you, Mr. Bridenstine. Thoughts about today's mission, what this means for NASA?